Welcome to Our Scars Speak. My name is Christina Miner. I'm the host of this podcast. And before we get into the podcast for tonight, I'd like to give a disclaimer that we are not providing any form of medical advice or type of treatment that we're not suggesting any of that. We truly encourage you to stick with your treatment plan with your medical professionals, and you're listening at your own discretion. So without further ado, tonight's guest is Diandra. I want to make for sure I'm pronouncing that right. And if I'm not, make sure
Yes.
you correct me. Diandra Denier Fields.
Denier Fields.
Okay. Wanted to make for sure. I like to make sure I get everybody's name correct. I'm just so glad to have you tonight. I met you on Instagram and I've been following you ever since. I love all of your material that you have out there. You're just a wealth of knowledge, but you also have an impactful story. So thank you for coming on Our Scars Speak tonight.
Thanks for having me, Christina. I love the podcast and I've been listening for, at least 6 months now. So I really enjoy
Oh,
all the
wow.
content and it's a pleasure to be a guest.
Thank you. Well, so who are you? Who is Diandra? Explain who you are. I don't like to explain people. I know everything, well, not everything, but I know some things about you which are very
Mhm.
impressive. But how do you describe yourself?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I recently submitted an article to the Wildfire magazine, and they asked
Oh,
the same kind of thing for that. So I came up with scientist and cancer creative
mm,
because I've always been in the sciences. I have two graduate degrees, one cell molecular biology and the other one in nutritional sciences.
wow.
So I've always been on that path, but um, in the last year or so, last April, I actually launched Cancer Free Haven.
Mhm.
So I started taking the knowledge that I had around cancer and late stage cancer diagnostics and started applying that to community outreach and breaking
Mhm.
down the science into easily understandable tidbits. And that's where Instagram came in really strong. And I've been on there ever since.
Yes, and you're doing so good. I mean, you've caught my attention for sure. So now that you've explained yourself, I know for a fact you've had two different diagnoses as far as cancer. But before we get into that, could you share with the audience, like, what was life like for you? Like, how old were you before you found out about the first diagnosis? And just how was everything going in your life at that time?
Yeah, so I am a two-time cancer survivor, like you said, but my family has a long history of cancer. So my grandmother passed away when I was young. She had lung cancer, but she survived for 10 years, which was amazing. This
Yeah.
was in the 90s and it
Ooh,
was really unheard of.
right.
And so some of that chemotherapy treatments where they'd give you really harsh chemotherapy and then rescue her doctor was one of the first ones to do that with lung cancer. And so it's one of those things that's like really rooted in my past. And
Right.
growing up, I was always, hearing about her, and I did Relay for Life and I walked for her. And in middle school, my aunt, my mother's sister, was diagnosed with breast cancer and she had a recurrence and passed away. So she was very young as well and passed away in her 40s. So it's been something that's been in my family. And I did Relay for Life with the American Cancer Society for a total of 10 years. And about 8 of those years, I was a team captain. So I was all about raising money and raising awareness. And I transitioned into degrees to go down the
Mm,
cancer researcher path. So I said, I want to make it so that my cousin who grew up without a mom, that doesn't have to
mm,
happen anymore, and that at least we can get earlier detection. So I was in my program at Towson University in Maryland, and I was working through my master's,
mhm.
and I had no health insurance because this was before Obamacare came out. So I didn't
Okay.
have health insurance. So it took me a while before I got a position that would cover that. And so when I did, I had this lump in my neck, and it had been there for a while because I was like, okay,
Mhm.
I don't have the money to cover
Right.
this. So I finally went in when I had the new health insurance, and I was 23 when I got diagnosed with stage 1 papillary thyroid cancer.
Wow. 23?
hmm hmm
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. and no family history of thyroid cancer. So I
Mhm.
knew lung cancer, breast cancer. My
Right,
dad's side, there's ovarian cancer. So I'm very much aware of the reproductive cancers, and I never smoked. So,
mhm,
lung cancer should be out. But just to have thyroid cancer come up out of nowhere, it was really hard to process because even when I went to my primary care and I said, I have this lump, she got
mhm.
out the measuring tape, measured it, and then sent me to the oncologist. And she didn't even say who she was sending me to, but it was a head and neck oncology surgeon.
Right,
And I didn't realize it until I'm sitting there in the waiting room looking down at his business card and seeing that it says oncology. Like, okay, so there's cancer here potentially, and no
right.
one told me about it. So, yeah, it was really jarring. And at 23, I just really wanted to get through it. I was in the middle of my program, and I didn't do any treatments right away because they had to schedule out the surgery. There's not much treatment you can do ahead of time for thyroid cancer.
Okay.
So you really just get on the books and then wait. So I had my surgery that summer. I ended up taking just a few months off, but I was getting irradiated. I had radioactive iodine, and I was sitting there and writing my thesis as I was fully, sweating out all this radiation out of my pores. And I was in the 2-week quarantine, but it was great for productivity
Right.
because I had my private time. But
Yeah.
I just, in my mind, I said, I can't stop. And I was like, to hell if cancer is going to take me out. I want to be a cancer researcher. I can't
Right.
let this happen.
Wow.
So I ended up graduating just like one semester later. But I moved through that so quickly and then got out and started my career. And it did take a while to take off, but I worked my way up through late stage cancer
Mhm,
diagnostics. And one of the last things that I did in my career before I went back to start a PhD program was
mhm.
I worked on a diagnostic tool that made Keytruda, the chemotherapy, be able to
Yeah.
go off label. So it was originally for lung cancer, and now it can be used for breast cancer. And so I was a part of that team
Wow.
that worked on the genetic mutations and qualifying that so that breast cancer survivors could get that treatment.
That is even more impressive. Wow. Okay. Well, you really that and you were I just think that is so inspiring, especially when I'm sitting there complaining about my papers and I'm like,
Mhm,
I just don't feel like doing this. But when I hear stories like this, like I pushed through
mhm,
in the midst of going through chemo, in the midst of all of this,
mhm,
being so young, because you really could have just said, you know what, I give up or I'll
mhm,
wait till later, but you kept
mhm,
going.
mhm,
That's impressive. So you get through this particular diagnosis and you're starting your career.
mhm.
And then what happens in between there and the next diagnosis?
Yeah, yeah. So I got to a certain point that I always feared a second diagnosis, and I didn't really have much information with thyroid cancer. They told me eat more fruits and vegetables, but it was vague. And then they told me have a low sodium diet because iodine is absorbed by your thyroid and you don't have a thyroid and it can
Oh,
cause swelling. So lymphedema is a risk for breast cancer survivors.
right.
And it also is a big risk for thyroid cancer survivors. So I had 40 lymph nodes removed in my neck. So they said low salt all the time for the rest of your life. And I actually did not develop any lymphedema
Mhm.
from the thyroid cancer, which was really good because I had a physical therapist that was putting me through the paces.
Right.
She really was a drill sergeant. So I highly recommend physical therapy to anyone going through any type of surgery, especially when you have lymph nodes removed, because it helps those channels to, open up to reform.
Mhm.
And they kind of, with my thyroid cancer, they pick them out one by one. So it's a little bit different than with my breast cancer, and I can talk about that later. But yeah, so I was seeing that there wasn't really much guidance, and then I came across Forks Over Knives, the documentary
Yeah.
about plant-based nutrition,
Mhm.
and they showed diabetics and people with cardiovascular disease. And it was really fascinating how they're able to reverse both of those diseases.
Right.
And one of the primary focuses that the plant-based diet does is it reduces your inflammation.
Mhm.
And we know that from the Angiogenesis Foundation, Dr. William Lee, that if you don't have a blood supply to cancer, then it won't grow larger than the head of a pin. So it would never get beyond that state. And that
Wow.
would be amazing if we could just kind of halt it there, right?
Right.
So that really got me into plant-based
Mhm.
nutrition. And at the time, I asked my lead scientists in my company, I was like, so when are we going to do early detection? Because we're doing this late stage detection for the
Right.
Keytruda, which is great and valuable, but I wanted to catch the person who was
Mm.
at my stage, like who was at the stage one, and be able to contribute more there. And he said a decade. So I looked at him and said, I don't want to wait a decade.
Right.
And so then I looked to join a nutrition program. So that's where I applied, and I applied to oncology programs, but I also applied to just nutrition programs and I got accepted. So I've been working on lifestyle research and Alzheimer's disease, but the same things that help Alzheimer's help cancer.
Mhm.
So I'm really just learning all those skills. And so that's where I ended up when I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay, so you ended up going more with the nutritional
Hmm.
side of things, far as science.
Hmm.
And is that also where the because you also have a minor in epidemiology, correct?
Hmm. Yes.
Okay, so that kind of just all encompassed one
Mhm.
another, or what made you like even go that direction far as a minor?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was in my PhD program in the first year, I studied human nutrition and I really wanted to do oncology. I had always been in the cancer research field. It just sounded natural, but my choices were mouse studies or a petri dish, so just cells. And I really wanted to work with people because I'm learning about what we
Right.
eat. And it's great to have those studies,
Hmm.
but us eating an apple is so much different than dripping apple juice onto a slide full of cells. So it's
Yeah.
just not translatable. And there's a lot of good things that we've learned from the field, but then it's not quite the same. So then I had an opportunity to join the RAP study, which is the Wisconsin Registry for Alzheimer's Prevention. And so
Okay.
this is a human observational trial. So they had people who had a family history of Alzheimer's enroll in the study, and they come in every 2 years and they get their blood work done and they do a dietary questionnaire.
Hmm.
And we have a diet for them that's called the MIND diet, and it's the Mediterranean and DASH diet combined, specifically for brain health. So it's
Okay.
emphasizing berries and fruits and vegetables. And
Mhm.
then it actually tells you things like fatty foods and sweets that are a negative towards brain health. So it was one of the first diets to actually say, eat more of this and give you a certain
Right.
amount, and then eat less of this and give you a cap on that too. So that's been my research there. And so the epidemiology minor just became a natural flow, and learning how to read those scientific papers and the
Right.
population studies. Like I'd already been going through cancer research articles on my own and just deciphering them. So this was a whole nother layer of understanding that I got from that.
I love it. And so when you explain, if you don't mind, real quick, just because you mentioned it, can you explain? I know, well, you pretty much explained the
Mhm.
Mediterranean.
Mhm.
But far as the difference between the Mediterranean and the DASH diet.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So the DASH diet is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. And so this is for people that have high blood pressure, potentially even high cholesterol. And so one of the main drivers of this is a low sodium
Mm.
diet. They really emphasize that. So coming with the thyroid cancer and being like, okay, I had the low sodium diet, they've realized that having everyone do this, it's between like 1,400 milligrams a day to 1,600 milligrams a day of salt. And
Mhm.
that has come down from the US average that they used to recommend, which was 2,400. So you're
Mhm.
cutting out about 1,000 milligrams of salt, which is good for cancer survivors that have lymphedema, because salt has your body hold on to more water. So then you can get more pooling of the lymph. So it's good for your blood pressure, good for lymphedema. And so, yeah, that was what the DASH diet was. So the Mediterranean diet and that together created the MIND diet.
Wow. And I
Mhm.
had never heard of the mind diet. I've heard of both of the other The other two diets, I had never just heard of them combined and called
Mhm.
specifically the mind diet. So thank you for that information.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I love science and medical field and behavioral science. So this is just right up my
Mhm.
alley. um,
Yeah.
so you went through all of that and explain to us now, right, going into after treatment and everything. If you want to share anything that you did experience through treatment, feel free. And then
Mhm.
getting to your next diagnosis.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mean, thyroid cancer was just surgery. I
Mhm.
had radioactive iodine. It was just a pill, and you took it, and then you go home and
Oh,
radiate yourself for 2 weeks, and that's it. So they just say don't be around pregnant women and children because it can damage their thyroid. So you don't want that to happen. But it was just a very quick in and out. I mean, I had to sign a waiver that said I wasn't going to get pregnant for 6 months. But beyond that, like at that point in time, I was in the mindset that I wanted this out right now. So of course
right.
I signed for the surgery, I signed for the lymph nodes. And I mean, if they wanted my right arm, I probably would have given it to
Could have
them.
gave it to
Like
him too.
that's the mindset that I was in then.
Right.
So it was very much like I had cancer, I treated cancer, and then I was past cancer.
Mhm.
So I really think that when I was first diagnosed and I went into the doctor's office and I asked them like, so when do I get to be a survivor?
Mm,
And my oncologist said, from the day you were diagnosed. And that really spoke to me because I see so many women and men that are just waiting. They're like, well, if I get that
right.
cancer-free label, if I get the NED, then I can be a survivor. But I really like how you put it into that context, which is like, no, you're surviving right now. Like every
Right.
day you're surviving. And it really just kind of gives you that kind of sense of peace that I don't have to wait. And it's very interesting because a lot of times doctors don't want to say that you're cancer free,
Right.
right? I don't
Yeah.
know if you experienced that, but
Yeah.
at stage 3 with me, and we'll get into that in a little bit, they didn't want to say that. So at least having the survivor label was something that I could, grasp onto and say, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm surviving and I'm
Right.
doing this. Yeah. Hmm.
Wow. So that, and also something that stuck out earlier that you were saying was, which is kind of backtracking a lot, but I
Hmm.
thought it was very important when you stated that they just kind of, here's your information and you're going to see an oncologist and you had no clue what was going on. And it just seems like even at that point, even though your mindset was like, okay, I'm coming in to get this check, but then it sort of seemed like it went into more like, okay, I really have to advocate for myself because I obviously didn't even know this was a thing until I was handed these papers. And it just reminded me of so many other stories. Like we go in for one thing and we're thinking, okay, they're going to guide us. And not everybody's like this, but
Hmm.
some, you don't get that guidance per se. You just kind of like, here you go. And you have no clue what's going on. So then you realize, oh, I have to push for what
Hmm.
I know that I need for understanding. Do you think that's kind of how you felt at that point when you were just kind of like handed that piece of paper?
Yeah, I mean, blind trust. I think that's what I had at that time, that I never heard of anyone reversing thyroid cancer. They told me that it's something that I could die from, but actually it's really like when you hit your 40s, that's when thyroid cancer tends to be more aggressive. So
Right.
I was still in that early phase. And I mean, I did a lot of research on my own that I
Right.
could. So I think that was advocating, but my circle that I had found was so small, right?
Mhm.
Everyone was like, you just need to do this. And, all of my family is like, oh my goodness, what's happening? You're so
Right.
young. You're definitely in the shock
Yeah.
period there. So that and I mean at 23, like there's no support network for 23-year-olds with
Mhm.
thyroid cancer. Like I'm going into these offices and most people are 40 or plus, and
Right.
it's over a decade ago. So the Facebook groups and the online community wasn't quite there. And I just kind of felt like I had to deal with it myself.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I had a very supportive advisor at my university, and he was one of the first people that I told. So, I think between that and having my family there, and I
Mhm.
had one family member send me money for my deductible, and then my brother sent me money for my out of pocket, and together it was like all covered.
Right,
So, I think just, yeah, even if you aren't really sure what's going on, if you
right.
let the close people, in your family and your friend circle know, then you'll be surprised who will step up for you.
Absolutely. So you're going now and life is moving on. At what point made you like how did first of all, your gene was
Mhm.
that later that you found
That
out
was
about the
later.
gene mutation?
Hmm.
Okay. So what led you to discovering far as breast cancer? How many years in between and how did you discover it?
Hmm. Yeah, so it was almost a decade exactly between the thyroid cancer and breast
Oh,
cancer. And so these are completely separate cancers. When
right.
they did the testing, they're like, yes, this is breast origin. It's not thyroid that moved to the breast. But yeah, it was the year before I was diagnosed, my mom went into the hospital for stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. She had noticed a lump, and she had a lumpectomy when I was in middle school. And so she got almost, a good 15 years of like not really any symptoms, not anything coming back. But then it did eventually come back, and she was just so scared since her sister had passed away from breast
Mm,
cancer. She knew that the treatments were very aggressive and that she might not make it through them. And so she had this, on the brink of everything, and finally went in to get help. And so that's where I was in Wisconsin with my husband, and we started coming back on monthly trips, just coming back
right.
and flying or driving and staying for a week. And I was just in there advocating for her every step of the way. Like my dad was rock solid, was there all the time,
Mhm.
but I would come in and be like, what's the treatment plan? And what are you guys
Yeah.
doing? And, I'm like emailing them stuff and updating the shared
Mhm.
document that we have. And I was her advocate for that. So that was the best training for going through it myself. And I
Right.
had felt something in my right breast during that time that I was caring for her and everything. But I just, I was doing flies at the gym and I felt a tear and it came up to the surface. So I just thought it was a muscle injury, but that was the breast cancer becoming invasive. And so I just had to, I mean, I know it's bad, but like
Wow.
when you're caring for someone else, like you're like, okay, when she is doing fine, when she's stable, then I'll take care of myself. And
Right.
that was the mindset that I was in. And so after 6 months of her treatment, she was improving and no longer needing to be in the hospital for longer
Mhm.
stays. And so I went in and said, hey, I'm ready to get looked at, knowing that it could be something. And then sure enough, within a week of me going to my OBGYN, I had mammogram, ultrasound,
Right.
biopsy, confirmation.
Wow. You said something very essential and very vital to people who are caregivers because a lot of times, because I was a caregiver for my sister when she was going through when she before she had a transplant and she was very ill. And during that time, there were things that I was supposed to do and I didn't. And I think we get very caught up in our loved ones, especially when they're very, very close family
Mhm.
members. And we don't think about ourselves. And it's so important for us to still maintain, and it's hard to do because sometimes you
Yeah.
just can't, because they may have so many appointments going on, but you sharing that is whoever's listening, I hope you hear what she is saying also, like she thought about her mom, which she should, but
Mhm.
at the same time we have to think about ourselves and find those times to get things done that we need to get done for us as well. It's so important. So you go in, you're getting all these tests, it's
Mhm.
confirmed that you have breast
Mhm.
cancer. And which breast can what was your diagnosis, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, yeah. So it was IDC, the invasive ductal carcinoma. And we knew that it was in the lymph nodes because they had done the ultrasound, they checked the chest, they checked the side, and they found at least one on that side. And so they were doing, the biopsies and everything. And we knew early on, like something suspicious there. So I think it was like the MRI that we had
Mhm.
and a PET scan, and those together confirmed that it was stage 3 because they didn't see it anywhere outside of just those immediate axillary nodes, so just in the side of the breast.
Okay, so it didn't go beyond the lymph nodes.
No, didn't go beyond that. And it was hormone positive, so estrogen and progesterone positive, and it was 80 and 70%. So really, really strong
Yeah.
for that. And then I was HER2 negative. So I matched
Okay.
my mom's breast cancer was triple positive. So she had the HER2 as
Oh,
well.
okay.
But mine was just the estrogen and progesterone.
Now, this may be a tough question for you. Well, maybe not, but during that time, like, did you tell your mom? Because
Mhm.
that had to have been very, so how did the family handle all of this? Because this is now two
Mhm.
loved ones going through the same diagnosis. I mean, not the same diagnosis, but breast cancer. So
Mhm.
how did that transpire?
Yeah, so of course my mom was the first one to tell because, she'd been there, she
Yep.
knows the routine, knows that, she had already been responding to treatment. So
Right.
we kind of had that indicator of like, look, if ours cancers match in any way, what worked for her will probably work for me.
Right.
So of course, no one wants to hear that, but I think
Right.
she was so much impacted from my thyroid cancer and just really worried for a long time about that. And for me, when I got diagnosed with breast cancer, I was like, I've been waiting for a decade to get a second diagnosis. And it happened because like when I talked about Relay for Life, I love going and meeting with the survivors every year, but we would always get updates and I'm like, how are you doing? And they would be like, okay, but I got this cancer diagnosis and I got this other one last year. And I really saw how we weren't doing anything to really help people once they get that initial diagnosis and you're
Uh-huh.
like cancer free. What are we doing lifestyle wise to
Right.
make these changes? So for me, I had that mental baggage for a long time of like, this
Mhm.
might happen. And it's like the shoe dropped, and I was like, okay, well, I'm upset, of course, but
Right.
it was more action mode. And I
Right.
knew this time was like my redemption. I was like, I got this. Like, I'm going to advocate for myself. I'm not going to rush into
Right.
anything, and I'm going to be informed. I'm going to do my research, and I'm not going to just trust blindly
Right.
any physician. And so that really, like, I stepped into that empowerment and I was like, there's no way that you're just going to go ahead and do a surgery on me if I
Right.
haven't tried other things first. And so
Oh,
I
okay.
think my mom saw that and was just like, all right, you got this, girl. Like we're gonna do this together. And we're swapping secrets and stuff. And so it was
Mhm.
really great for her to be able to give me tips and to have
Right.
that too. And on my husband's side, my mother-in-law, she had a stage 0 breast cancer. So she
Okay.
would be considered a pre-vivor in our community.
Oh,
And, picked up the phone, called her, what are we
okay.
doing? Other side of the family aunt already had breast cancer, so there was multiple and
Yeah.
cousins. I wasn't alone this time,
Right.
and that was a big
Yeah.
difference. That thyroid cancer, I was just me and my
Yeah.
family, but now it was like that person's been through it, that person's been through it. And it's sad to know that many people that have gone through it, but at the same time was like every one person could give me another tip
Yeah. Yeah.
that really helped. Mhm.
That's so true. Support is everything. Like
Mhm.
even like you were talking about like social media. I can't imagine because that was how many years ago from the first you said
Yeah,
20 years,
so it
but
it was a 2022 was
yeah.
breast cancer, and 2012 was my thyroid cancer. So there was,
Mhm.
Facebook was around, but it
Yeah.
was very minimal and there wasn't quite the same community that we have now.
Right. And sometimes people just didn't talk, especially different
Mhm.
cultures, how we were brought up in our families and different things. It plays a role in how we share information too. So now it seems like a lot of people are more vocal and
Mhm.
really wanting to share. So, wow. Okay. So, what ended up happening with the treatment plan when you went to the
Mhm.
doctor, and how did that go for you this time around?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah. This time
advocating this
around.
time even more. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm advocating for myself. And it's funny because my mom, like when she would go to her oncologist, they would say, "Here comes trouble," because she is the one that will always be like, "Well, I don't want to do this, but I want to do this instead."
okay.
And she gave him a couple of scares a few times. So they always called her trouble. So then I was like, I'm gonna be the same way. So like I don't know if you had a nurse navigator with
Yes,
yours.
I did.
So I was assigned one with mine, and I had my OBGYN, which was the one that called me and said, you had a positive result. And I
Right.
really appreciate that because she was the one that I saw first.
Hmm.
But then they sent me to the nurse navigator, and the nurse navigator's like, okay, we're going to send you to a surgeon. And I was like, no, and no, thank you. Hold the phone. You said I had cancer and you want me to go to
Right.
a surgeon. I want to see an oncologist because I want to know my options.
Right.
And she was like really thrown off, like, why would someone say that they'll refuse to see someone
Right.
when really like this is the order? But I just felt like it's like the cancer conveyor belt or the cancer
Yeah.
treadmill. And I did that
Yeah.
with thyroid cancer. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm like, I step off. I'm like, okay. So first, I want to meet with an oncologist. And
Mhm.
then when I have my oncologist booked, I will speak with the surgeon. And it was very interesting how that turned out. And this is actually something I talk about in my course is that
Mhm.
I chose that. I chose to see the oncologist first, and the
Mhm.
oncologist had the worst bedside manner. And he told me, like, this is your diagnosis. And he's like, and these are the treatment steps. And I started asking questions. I
Right.
started saying, hey, it's a hormone positive cancer. And so what my researcher mind said was, normally they do the hormone treatment after they do surgery,
Mhm.
chemotherapy, radiation. At the end, they do the hormone treatment. And I said, why would you do that? If you know that this is 80% being fed by
Mhm.
estrogen and progesterone, then why would you wait till the end to do this? We
Right.
should do this first. And so as I was talking to him and saying like, well, I would like to do this, like, let's
Mhm.
try this first. And then maybe this order, because I wanted to get down to a lumpectomy. And when I met with the surgeon, it was like, no, you would need a mastectomy at this point in time. So
Mhm.
after this discussion, at the end, he's like, you know what? I don't think we're going to do anything before surgery. You're just going to have to do surgery and then you could do treatment afterwards. He said, I don't think that you would actually do the treatment. So that's why we're going to do it that way. And I just left that office, looked at my husband, and said, we are not seeing him again. So I wonder if in my organization, if they knew, because the breast surgeon I met with was so kind, was so
Mhm.
personable, was like, let me pull up all the imaging, let me discuss
Right.
it with you. I'm sitting there like, what is that thing? What is that? And she's
Mhm.
explaining it, she's drawing out the little notes. She was very good with bedside manner. So I
Right.
don't know if they wanted me to go to her first because they knew the first
Oh, yeah.
oncologist was not the one that you want to see. But so then I ended up calling back the nurse navigator and saying, like, I refused to meet with that oncologist again. Give me another one.
Mhm.
And they gave me an older male doctor. And I'm like, this is a female cancer and I'm young. I want a young woman who can sympathize with me because I didn't have a family yet. I wanted to have my own children.
Right.
And it just, I didn't click. I didn't mesh well. So one of the things that I advocate others to do is that, like, just because you're assigned a person does not mean you have to stay with them. And if it
Right.
doesn't fit for you, it's going to be hard the whole time through.
Yeah.
So I fired him, and then the nurse navigator was trying to put things on my schedule, and I was like, she was putting in the surgeon on the day and the exact time that I had a class, and I said, look, I have like 10 other hours that I'm available on these 2 days that you said the surgeon is available. give me anything else except for this. And she said, well, you should get used to it because your schedule is going to be busy and you're going to have a lot of these appointments coming up. And that was the last time that I heard from her. That appointment got rescheduled. She never called back. She like basically like took me off and was like, she doesn't need a nurse navigator. So if you can do it on your own, then you can do it on your own. And I mean, I've since switched to a different, I've relocated, so I have a
Mhm.
different like nurse there on
Right.
staff, and she's amazing. So it's not the same at every
Wow.
place, but if you're not
Right.
feeling heard and if you're being steamrolled and they're just saying, oh, well, tough luck, you just need to accept that you're a patient and give up your life. No, you don't. You can
Right.
have just like one day a week. And that's what I did. I said, this one day a week, I am not having any appointments with the exception of radiation. I
Right.
had to do that then, but
Right.
you can plot that out for yourself and just say, I need a rest day. I need a day where I'm going to be me.
Right. Because it will take you over if you allow. I mean, between the doctor's appointments, just all the information that they throw at you so quick.
Yeah.
And one thing I have to say about my surgeon at the time, she let me know right in the beginning, this is your journey. We go as fast as you want to go, as slow as you want to go. But I'm gonna tell you what what your prognosis could potentially be with what your diagnosis is. But I think that, yeah, that's that advocacy part. Like you have to have those conversations, and sometimes they're tough, and sometimes people don't want to have them because they're kind of intimidated because it's a doctor, but they're human too, and we're human, and we're fighting for our lives
Mhm.
at this point. So no, I commend you 100%.
Thank you.
So when you ended up switching doctors, what did your treatment plan look like from that point?
Yeah. Yeah. So I made sure to get the blessings, right? I
Right.
never stopped going. So I think
Right.
that was very important. I
Right.
always like maintained. And when we agreed on something, I went with it. So my oncologist, while she had her reservations, she let me know. She's like, we can try this thing. You want to try the hormone treatment first? We'll try the hormone treatment first. So I started on tamoxifen initially. And she had already done this little bit of background research to see that actually tamoxifen works really well after surgery to kind of maintain your cancer risk. So
Mhm.
it's binding to the cancer cells. It blocks your
Right.
body's estrogen from binding, but it doesn't cut off your body's estrogen supply. So it
Okay.
really, depends on how many cells you have in your body at once. If you have a lot of cancer going on and a lot of these receptors, then that small dose of tamoxifen is not going to be enough. So I started with that. And she said, you have to be on this for about 3 months before we can get you to the ovarian suppression shot
Mm.
and to the aromatase inhibitor. So my mom, being postmenopausal, she got the aromatase inhibitor immediately. And when she was in the hospital, she visibly saw her tumor shrink.
Mm.
So we knew that, like, in our family, it responds well to this. And that was the ultimate goal. And so my oncologist, she said that we're going to do the hormone treatment. We did the tamoxifen. We'll check again between like 4 to 6 weeks. So she really pushed for that 4 week point. I got a
Right.
second biopsy. And what she did is she looked at a PEPI score. So a PEPI score is just, we have like the hormone positivity,
Right.
HER2 status, and PEPI is like how fast is the cancer progressing, like
Right.
how rapid is it dividing. So part of that is Ki-67, which is at one point in time, how many of the cells are dividing at once. So they say 20% or less means that it's pretty slow and you have
Mhm.
more time. But mine was pegged at 40% initially on the first biopsy. And the second biopsy was also a match for that. So they said it didn't slow down. And so we need to try something different. And so the scientist in me said, just because the research study says that most people responded within 4 weeks doesn't mean all people respond within 4 weeks. And
That's a
she's
scientist.
like, yeah. She's like, do you want to pull the ripcord now? She's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, the same thing that I told you we were going to do before. We're going to keep doing that thing. And we're going to keep working towards the AI and towards the ovarian suppression.
Right.
And she was just like, what? Like, why is this woman like, she must be insane because I just told her that it wasn't responding. And so we did that. We went ahead and did another, I think it was an MRI at the time. They saw that there was some growth on the MRI. And what the MRI did is it opened up the door for me to qualify for an immunotherapy. So
Oh,
I know one of the things you wanted me to talk about is my genetic mutation. So this is
yeah.
the best time, I think, to
Go
talk
for it.
about it.
Go for it.
So I did the BRCA panel as a
Mhm.
young 20-something-year-old woman. They never called me back, meaning that it was negative. I got
Right.
diagnosed with breast cancer. They asked me, do you know if you have BRCA? And I tell them my OBGYN never called me back. And they're like, that's not a response. That's not really what they're supposed
Right.
to do. So let's do it again. So they ran it again in that stat form. So it's BRCA stat.
Mhm.
I talk about this in my course as well, which just means within a week, we can get you a response. You can make your decisions on treatment, on surgery, things like that. Comes back negative. When I met with the genetic counselor, I pulled up my family history tree and I said,
Mhm.
like, look, here's me, and here's cancer, 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 cancer.
Yeah.
And I also had cancer twice. So she agreed immediately with me. She was like, you do need to get this further investigated. She said,
Mhm.
there's more than just BRCA. And
Right.
so we kind of dived into it. And I said, you know, give me the whole kit and caboodle. What can you
Right.
have? So you can test for BRCA and then this small set of genes, or you can test across all cancers.
Right.
And so I said, let's look at all cancers and like just throw the kitchen sink at it. So it ended up being over 150 different genes that I had tested for, and all negative except for one little one that popped up positive. And so this one is called FANCM.
Mhm.
And so it predisposes you to Fanconi's anemia, but you need other genes to actually trigger that. So one mutation on its own is not enough. And I only had one mutation of it. But what it does is it actually is very important in DNA repair. So it's a similar to the BRCA gene. So the BRCA genes also have an issue in the DNA repair mechanism, and they're also considered an FANC gene as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
they actually discovered them first. So they call them breast cancer gene 1,
Right.
BRCA1,
And
breast
brackets.
cancer gene 2, BRCA2. But they actually,
Right.
when they looked at them and they like quantified them together with these
Mhm.
other mutations, FANCM just means that it's one that the gene, it starts reading and trying to make this protein, and it hits a stop codon, and it just says, hey, we give up, and we're just going to only write the first this amount of this protein, and the rest we're just going to not even bother trying. So
Okay.
versus like BRCA is a spot in between, and
Right.
BRCA is a whole gene. So you can have a spot here, here, here,
Mhm.
here, here, and people have them at different areas, and that determines like how much the protein can actually function. So
Oh, okay.
mine's just like, we give up and we're just not going to show up for work today.
Right.
And so I have one lazy worker over here that's just like, I don't want to repair anything.
Right.
And this is a gene that's in all your cells and expressed in all your cells.
Right.
And then I have the other one over here that's like, I'm doing double duty. I'm trying to pull the weight of the other one that's being so
Right.
lazy. And so there's a thing called epigenetics, and we know that you can, with diet and lifestyle, you can amplify certain genes to make
Right.
them work more and produce more
Mhm.
of these protective proteins and turn on that tumor suppressor
Right.
to make up for ones that are lacking. So this is another thing I cover in my course, is just that just because we have a mutation doesn't mean that our body can't do its job. It
Mhm.
just needs more help, and we need to be more aware of the different risk factors.
Right.
And so I became plant-based, and other people are like, well, I don't want to do that. And I said, that's fine for you, but
Mhm.
like with my genetic makeup, I really, really need to do
Right.
everything possible because I've already had cancer twice. And if
Mhm.
it happens in the future, I want to know I did everything that I
Right.
could. Like there's things outside of our control. And they if they had known about my gene, they might have recommended some differences in treatment.
Mm-hmm.
But since this is a rare one, it's only in 4% of breast cancer cases, and I've never met anyone else with it yet, so maybe I will
Yeah.
soon. They didn't have any recommendations. They said we just treat it as normal cancer. And I was going back through it and saying, like, what does this mean? What does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
Started doing research, found out that this gene is linked to lung cancer, ovarian cancer, breast cancer, thyroid cancer,
Thyroid cancer.
and all solid tumors. So pretty much just the whole gambit. But that was the connection, that this
Wow.
mutation probably stemmed off my thyroid cancer. And then
Mm,
it also probably stemmed the breast cancer. So I finally had that sense of relief, like, okay, I know
right.
what's going on. And the funny thing is, if I had BRCA, they would have suggested a double mastectomy. But I have
Mhm.
this almost similar function misfunction gene,
Right.
and they didn't know about it. So I just said, we're going to only take one. So we're not going to take healthy tissue that is unaffected. And I'm not going to assume and be a pessimist and say that that side's going to get it too,
Right.
because if I'm at risk for lung cancer from the same mutation, I'm not going to just go take out a lung,
Well, that's
preemptively.
true. Yeah, you're right. You have to
So
prioritize save one of, yeah.
yeah. And it's a personal choice, but for me, like,
Right.
I didn't have children yet. I wanted to breastfeed. So I had that in my mind, like, very clear, like, every choice I make is so I can have this family after breast cancer and even just try for it. So if it doesn't happen, that's okay.
Mhm.
It's God's will, it's in his hands, and we'll
Right.
adopt if it doesn't work. But I wanted to have the opportunity. So I
Right.
turned down chemotherapy because I looked at this mutation. It said, if I can't repair from the DNA damage, they say, like, oh, you're young and healthy, you should be able to take this therapy. But I'm like, but all the cells in my body are going to be hit, and only 50% of the defenses are up.
Yeah.
So I chose the immunotherapy instead, and that worked really well. So we came to the surgery time, and things had progressed, but when they took it out, they said it was dying from the inside. So we had proof that all of those therapies that I was on were working. And so moving forward, it was like, stay with the same treatment plan. And I had confidence that I knew my cancer responded. And that's the one thing about neoadjuvant treatment before surgery, that you gain that insight that
Yeah.
your cancer does respond to this. When you take it out first and then do chemo afterwards or immunotherapy afterwards, you don't really know. It's kind of a guess because there's no
Yeah.
marker, there's no measure for it. So I totally understand people wanting to get the surgery done immediately. But if you do have that chance to try something, if it's not like on the borderline and you
Mhm.
have some wiggle room, then you might be able to see what actually responds before that.
Wow. So basically, you went in there and advocated for yourself and kind of came up with your own treatment plan. I mean,
Mhm,
even though they, told you what your options were, but you really went in there and did your own treatment plan with the research that you knew and you gained
mhm,
through, and they tell you not to look on Google and stuff like that, but I do believe there's some good sites that we can go on and really
mhm,
research. Um, so I'm kind of like, I'm never opposed to people going out and researching
mhm,
because they don't spend enough time with us, honestly, to even tell us every little detail.
mhm,
So I'm a huge researcher, just like I like to explore and read different things. So yes, being in the know of what's going on with you, even if it's just looking up your medications and the
mhm,
treatment, the whole treatment plan. Now for you, you had, of course, your knowledge from, education as well as just your love for research and science. So
mhm,
you had all of that. But I think her just having that conversation with you and saying, okay, well, we will try it. That
mhm,
was good because truthfully, like what happened to you before, a lot of people would have been like, no, I'm not even going to treat you because I don't
mhm.
want to be responsible if something
Yeah.
happens. So
Mhm.
that's good that she allowed that because
Yeah,
truthfully, our bodies and it should
it
be our,
is.
so
Yeah, and you do, so if you do this, I would recommend going to PubMed. So that is a
oh
government
yeah.
website in the US,
Mhm.
and that is where all of our funding that we pay through our tax dollars goes to cancer research, and everything there has to be published and has to be accessible to US citizens. So that is a great place to go to. There's other centers like MD Anderson Cancer Center, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer
Mhm.
Center. These centers have a lot of resources on there. So if you want to learn about your diagnosis, they're
Yeah.
there. And then that's also what I put in my course Thrive from the start, is where can we go to get these reliable sources? And I need a clear understanding of what my diagnosis is. And like, that's exactly what I put in there,
Yeah.
because I had to piecemeal this from all these different websites. And so I said, what if the next person down the road can just have everything nicely
Yeah.
packaged, and they don't have to get lost down Dr. Google and,
Right.
with people sending them all these weird Facebook messages about this miracle drug or that thing. Like, it's just the real science, and it's really just to empower you so that you
Yeah.
understand what you're getting into. Because I feel lucky that I could do my own research and advocate for myself. Like, as I was going through like the option for chemotherapy, it does reduce your chances of having a natural childbirth
Right.
and conceiving afterwards. So what you can do is this ovarian suppression shot actually can like double your chances of having a natural conception after
Mhm.
chemotherapy, because it turns off your ovaries.
Right.
And so you can start it at the same time you start chemotherapy, and it just causes less damage to them because it's saying we're off. And so it won't absorb the chemotherapy as much. And
Oh,
it's just such a small thing that you can, they said like your chances of having a child and conceiving naturally are about 15% after chemotherapy, but it goes up to 30% with this ovarian suppression.
okay.
So it just, why wouldn't we all do that, right? Like, why
Right.
wouldn't this be a thing that all doctors suggest and say we can double your rates? And I mean, that's something that not everyone knows about.
Right.
And so I'm very glad that I did my research. And I took a risk with my treatment
Yeah.
plan. I
Yeah.
know this for sure,
Yeah,
but
you
I
did.
just had that confidence, and like knowing that they didn't understand my mutation was
Mhm.
what really drove me. I was finding articles and I would bring them into my appointments with the doctor, and I'd say, here's the new thing I have for you today, and let's learn about this together. And so if you do that and you find a PubMed article, print it out and bring it in, they will read it with you or
Wow.
read it before or after your appointment, get back to you. And it's just going to be, they'll have all of the knowledge, because they do continuing education, but they can't stay
Right.
up on the breadth of everything all at once. So
Right.
it's something that you have to really advocate for yourself. And with my mutation, I found out that radiation works like 8 times more effective for my mutation than
Yeah,
other
you told me that.
mutations.
Yeah, I remember you
Yeah.
saying that.
So that was really cool. And I was like, okay, so when it comes down to it, I'm going to do my immunotherapy. It's going to protect that, bad cells,
Right.
to protect the good cells and help the bad cells and kill them off. And then I'm going to do radiation, and that's going to be that targeted, because the most likely place for the cancer to return is where it started.
Right.
So, you can kind of like calculate that risk and the reward. And I said, you know what, it's going to burn my skin and it's going to be tough, but I'm going to know that like I did the most effective thing for my personal cancer.
Yeah. And that's important, personal,
Mhm,
because
mhm,
it's not everybody else's, it's not the doctor's,
mhm.
it's ours. And what are we going to do with that?
Yeah.
And I think your story is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Just how you fought so hard for what you
Mhm,
wanted. And so many of us, we get tired, it's like nobody's listening. It's like
mhm.
we're telling you, these things aren't working, or we don't want to try it. So, and I'm glad they listened. Your last doctor listened to you, so that's
Mhm.
good. So
Yeah.
is there anything else that you like to share about your treatment plan, or your story about going through the various cancers or mutations? Is there anything else that you may want to share with the audience about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the next big thing that I want to mention is having a therapist. So having a psychologist really helps. during my thyroid cancer, and I was just so young, I was like, I didn't even
Yeah.
know to ask for help. But cancer can be a traumatic event. And so I was looking for a psychologist even before I got diagnosed with breast
Mhm.
cancer after the pandemic,
Mhm.
everyone was struggling. And so I thought I had anxiety, depression, normal things.
Mhm.
And then she had me do this intake form. She's like, okay, do anxiety, do depression. Then she's like, then do the PTSD form.
Mhm.
And my PTSD ranking was a lot higher than the anxiety and depression. And
Yep.
so we really focused on that and channeling that. And I had a lot of regret, resentment for my treatment choices that I rushed through. As I was learning about plant-based nutrition, I had heard some thyroid cancer survivors had reversal of their thyroid
Oh.
cancer, and it really hit me. I was like, did I just lose an organ and all these lymph nodes for nothing? So we really worked through that baggage and thinking that I would have a second diagnosis, and I made it happen. So like, yeah, there were probably things in my life that added to that, but
Right.
mentally I was preparing myself for a second diagnosis. So I think my biggest advice is to go ahead and seek help if you feel like you need it. Just someone to talk to, like a
Yeah.
friend. Doesn't even have to be an official therapist, but I think working through it now and just learning to live in the everyday, like
Mm.
to appreciate, smell the
Yeah.
roses, like they say. You don't have to be like backpacking through Europe and
Right.
climbing Kilimanjaro. Like you don't have to be doing these crazy things, but there was a quote from the American Symphony documentary that came out
I
recently.
love it.
Oh,
Mm.
it was just so
Ah,
touching. And I think she said, because she was stage 4,
yeah.
and they said that you're gonna have this treatment forever, and they were like, live each day like it's your last. And she
Yeah.
flipped it and said, I'm gonna live each day like it's my first, with
Mm-hmm.
that curiosity, like a child that is just like, oh, look at the flowers and look at these pans. I want to bang
Right.
on them. And it's so fun. And like kids, you don't have to take them out to crazy places for them to have a good time. They can
Right.
just have it where they are. So that really got to me, is that, we should acknowledge the pain and the hurt that we go through. Like in my second diagnosis, I was like, I'm going to scream, I'm going to cry, I'm going to
Yeah.
be angry, feel it, and
Yep.
then just let it go. Because then I was able to say, okay, I've gotten that out of my system. And then I could put on that, scientist hat and just be like, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
I didn't fear that there weren't going to be options, because even when
Right.
you think there's no options, there's things like clinical trials that are just new options out there.
Mhm.
And I love the Instagram community. It's so supportive. And
Yes.
there's Bethany from My Grew Cancer that's been on
Yeah.
here before. And
Yep.
I was chatting with her, and she's like, stage 4 just needs more. Like it's not a death sentence. It just
Right.
it just needs a little bit more. So
Yeah.
I really like that. It's just, it doesn't matter what treatments you choose. So I empower all women to choose their own plan. If you want a double mastectomy, if you want to go flat,
Yeah.
like whatever you want to do, if you want to do chemo, like it, you just believe in it and own it and know
Yep.
that this is my choice and it will do what it needs to do for you. So that's what I do with Cancer Free Haven. I say I support all options, but work with your care team, work with your
Right.
oncologist. Don't run away from them, because they want to help you,
Right.
and they can do all these really cool things like check supplements for you with your medications,
Mhm.
and refer you to acupuncture for pain and all that kind of cool stuff, that if we just gave them the chance and the opportunity to help, then they would.
I love it. And you made me, you reminded me of something I used to say all the time. A lot of people, they're like, oh, I got to make my bucket list. I don't
Mhm.
like that word, like
Yeah.
bucket list, because like I'm not trying, it's like, I don't want to associate that. I know we are going to leave here one day, but
Mhm.
let's not rush it. So I always say I created my to live list. I don't call it,
Mm.
because I'm like, no, I'm here. I'm in
Yeah.
the moment now. And I don't know when God's gonna have me to leave this earth, but I do know that I'm here at the moment.
Mhm.
And I'm like you. I'm like, I gotta feel it. I have to be in the moment of feeling every single emotion and then allow myself to then release it. However,
Mhm.
whether, I tell people, whether you pray, whether you meditate, however you want to release it, but come back to a place where you can release it in not such a negative way, but try to
Mhm.
do it in, a positive way or a peaceful way, a place that'll give you.
Yeah.
So that, okay, so you've talked about that, which is, thank you for thinking, for talking about the testing that you had done,
Mhm.
because those tests are very, very vital when people
Mhm.
come into our offices and they're trying to figure out, are they anxious, are they depressed?
Mhm.
And some people forget about the PTSD one. And I am a true firm believer that a lot of us have PTSD from just
Mhm.
hearing the words, you have cancer. It starts literally, I think, from
Mhm.
that point for a lot of us. So tell us what's going on now with you. What are some things, some tips you want to leave us maybe, or just what's going on, whatever you want to share, what's going on
Mhm.
with you, with Cancer Free Haven. Have at
Mhm.
it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I know we
Yeah, I've
could keep
enjoyed it.
talking forever. Yeah, but so some fun tips that I have. I mean, Cancer Free Haven, I do a mixture. I share my
Right.
current journey, and then I also share just more general advice for thyroid cancer survivors, general cancer survivors,
Oh,
breast cancer survivors. And one of the recent videos that you actually posted was on soy and breast cancer. So one of the reasons I knew my first oncologist was not going to be my oncologist for long was that he said, and I quote, "You have a hormone positive cancer. So I don't want you to be going out there and adding soy into your diet every day, trying to help this. But if you go out to takeout and you get some Chinese food with tofu, then it's okay." And I was just like, I'm a nutritional science major. And he said, my wife is a dietitian. So dietitians are required to follow a certain handbook of guidelines that has
right.
been accepted by the US government. They are approximately 10 to 15 years behind the research at a minimum. And they're very slow to make changes. And they're the ones that will give you the eat more, eat less kind of things without even asking you, well, how many servings of fruits and vegetables do you eat a day? So
Mhm.
I am a nutritionist. That's what I qualify myself as. I have a PhD in nutritional science, and I can use publications that came out yesterday to help people
Right.
today. We do not need to wait. The
Right.
downsides of eating healthy are you may be more regular, you may have more energy. There's not a lot of downside. So I think you should be more cautious when it comes to supplements and definitely have that run through your oncologist and double check everything there. But you eating more fruits, like I eat, berries and bananas in the morning and an orange or an apple in the evening, and then maybe some dates in the evening as well. Like, so you can have as many as you want. Don't fear sugar. And then when you're
Right.
talking about the soy, so there are two different kinds of receptors on our breast cells. So there's receptor A, which is where our body's estrogen binds to. And then there's receptor B, which is where these plant-based estrogens or phytoestrogens bind to from like the soy or
Right.
flax seeds. And so what happens is when you take tamoxifen, that puts a cap over the estrogen receptor A. So as your body's estrogen comes in, tries to bind, it says no. So that's why you may have like some shrinking in your breast tissue, and it
Right.
is preventative against breast cancer. Versus when you're eating soy or any fruit or vegetable that has these phytoestrogens or isoflavones, it's going to go and block the other receptor, which just puts it at a normal growth.
Mhm.
And so that is really safe. You can do tamoxifen and eat as much soy as you want, unless you have a soy allergy. And I've had
Right.
a soy allergy diagnosed in the past. So I use more fermented versions of soy. So tempeh is a fermented
Oh,
soybean, and you get actually more of the isoflavones than you would in edamame, which is the raw soybean, or in a
right.
soy milk. So you get increased quantity, and the fermentation process breaks down those proteins so that your body doesn't react to them in the same way that it would to the raw soybean. So you can try
Okay.
that. Or, like I said, just ground flaxseed, a tablespoon, 1 to 2 tablespoons a day, and you can put them in
Mhm.
oatmeal or in a smoothie. And that is, as I just transitioned off of my hormone treatment, the first thing I said was every day I'm having a flaxseed because I'm like, that is my hormone blocker, right? That
Right,
is my
right.
breast cancer treatment in the form of nutrition.
Mm,
So we're going to still follow up. I have a 3-month washout period, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another set of blood work and check tumor markers before I try to get pregnant. So we're still using all of the research and all the tools that the
right,
oncologists have. But at the same time, I'm going to step up for myself and make sure that this is a priority, that I'm
right.
getting that in every day because I had hormone positive breast cancer.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And honestly, my dietitian, I don't know, I don't know what she's doing on a regular, but she keeps me very informed with the latest. She goes to a
Okay.
lot of workshops for
Hmm.
new information. And
Okay.
so all of this she shared with me. She's like, you can have the fruits, you can have, she's like, now, of
Mhm.
course, you don't want to eat a whole bunch of processed foods or,
Yes.
high sugary foods that you find in candies and stuff, but eat
Hmm.
your fruits, eat your vegetables. So everything, when you did that video, I was like, oh, she's on point with what
Yeah.
with everything, because so many people get scared because of the data from years ago about the soy when they
Hmm.
didn't know the
Yeah.
difference.
Mhm.
And they were like, don't eat it because it's going to cause breast cancer. And now that with the research, it's like, no, you can't have that
Mhm.
particular type of soy. So thank you for
Yeah.
breaking that down. I knew you broke it down very, very good for all of us to understand.
Good.
um,
Thank you.
so what's going on with Cancer Free Haven?
Mhm. Yeah, so today I'm really excited to announce that I've launched my course called Thrive from the Start. So I know when I was talking with Christina a few months ago, this was in the works, and
Yeah.
I just had no idea the amount of work that I was going to put into this. So I originally said when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I had to look everywhere for all the
Right.
information, and coming across those websites that were like not reliable sources and just
Right.
spending like so many hours doing this research. I said, what if for the next person, the next woman or man with breast cancer, they could just sign up for my course, watch the videos, learn about the diagnosis, learn about treatment options,
Mhm.
and then have everything like right there. So I don't pressure anyone about choose
Right.
this or choose that, but I just when you're in these appointments with the oncologist, I don't know about you, but sometimes my brain just pushes erase and I forgot everything they said.
Yep.
So, what is great about my course is that you can go into your portal. So, most people have like an online login for their health.
Uh-huh.
So, if you go to the notes section is what they put in there to remind themselves what should I say to this patient the next time they come in? Or if they're working in a team like a surgeon and an
Right.
oncologist, then they can cross share those notes. So
Right.
this is exactly what your oncologist meant to say to you, even if you like forgot it completely or they forgot to say something, it's in there. So you can take these notes and then go into my course and like there's a module that's on
Uh-huh.
receptors, right? So it's like your diagnosis and you can like look at the receptors that are on your notes from the oncologist and then read and watch the module that's talking about what the receptors do. And then you will understand it
Right.
and you can like watch it over and over again. Like you forget, watch it again.
Right.
So I'm really, really excited about this. So I have the initial diagnosis module is out now. And next week I am dropping the and making informed treatment decisions module. So you will
Okay.
have, I know what my breast cancer is, and these
Right.
are the main options. So it's not extensive, it doesn't cover everything.
Right.
But I mean, even for module one, I have this huge like printout PDF that you can just download, and it just kind of gives you everything as like, okay, here's a
Wow.
general cadence of what's going on,
Right.
what to expect as far as like, do you have all the right doctors, right? Like, so I even talk about that. Like, maybe here's someone that you haven't thought about seeing, and when would you want to include them in your journey?
Right.
So it's really cool like, coming all together now, and I'm just like so excited to share it with the world and to be able to like get you thriving from the
Yeah.
start, because that's what I wanted to do is like kick off and say, yes, I have breast cancer, this sucks, but what am I going to do about it? And I'm going to be empowered, and I'm going to
Yeah.
know the questions to ask, and I'm going to make decisions for me now and my future.
Wow, that's good. I love that because I don't think I've seen any material quite extensive as what you're
Mhm.
explaining right now. That is so good. So it comes out today, right?
Yep, it's on
Okay.
sale now. Yeah, and so I have like two other modules that will be coming out, trickling them out. So it's like over
Okay.
3 months to not overwhelm you. If you're in the beginning stages, you really just need to get
Right.
your footing. So the third module is on the wellness within. So it's all things mental health and me going through with my therapist and working
Right.
through this baggage from my previous diagnosis and the current one. It's everything that I can think of. So I'm just trying to
Wow.
put it all out there for you. And then the last one is called Creating Your Cancer-Free Haven. So one of the big things in my diagnosis was having that. I had like Tuesdays. I was like, this is my sacred day. I
Mhm.
will not go to any appointments except for when I had radiation. And I just had it be my me day. And so even if you can't do a whole day, maybe you can
Right.
say, in the morning for this hour is going to be my me time.
Uh-huh.
So I know a lot of people won't ever hear that you're cancer free. And my oncologist, even with the surgery, was successful, clear margins, no evidence, would not tell me that I had no evidence of disease. It was my radiologist that pulled up the scans and said, I don't know if they told you, but this is NED. And I was like, that's amazing. This is great. We should be celebrating. Why wasn't my
Right.
oncologist saying that? So if you're stage 3 or stage 4, you may not hear cancer free, but there
Right.
can be a space in your mind that is cancer free. You can take care
Yeah.
of your health and say, like, this is what I'm doing for myself every day through diet and
Yeah.
exercise and mental health. So all these things I said really need to be a part of the cancer survivor, just kidding,
Yeah.
thriver journey. Like, so you
Yeah.
get through that, but then you become a thriver. So that really excited about that second half there. It's all these things that we don't really talk about too
Right.
much in the cancer community. Mhm.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna have to go check that out. So where can
Yeah.
we check it out? Where can we
Yeah.
order it, or yeah, where do you
Sure, sure. Yeah, so it's cancerfreehaven.com.
okay.
And I'm also on Instagram. So it's cancer.free.haven.
Yep.
But if you search hashtag cancerfreehaven, you will find it. It will come up on Facebook. It will come up on Instagram. So it's all there. And yeah, I'm super excited for this to be out in the world.
I love it. I'm happy for you. And whoever actually goes and gets it, which I'm sure you'll get a lot of people because it's
Yeah.
so informational, because
Mhm.
a lot of things are kind of like vague, or but that
Yeah.
seems very detailed. So
Mhm.
congratulations.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank you.
So you had a song on your reel.
Mhm.
And you did a beautiful reel, by the way.
Oh.
But what's the name of your song, and why did
Mhm.
you choose this song, and who's it by?
Yeah, yeah. So my song was called Thunder and it's by Imagine Dragons.
Mhm.
And the reason that I chose this song is that we didn't cover it too much, but my breast cancer diagnosis came in the middle of my PhD. And so my advisor had told me, you can just take a break from the program and like come back later. My husband said it too. And I was like, I appreciate this, but I needed something outside of cancer, outside of being a patient to just keep me moving forward. I
Yeah.
needed that goal. And so as I was coming to the end of my program, I had been submitting all these documents and getting ready. I had my defense date scheduled, and my advisor was just like, I don't know that we're ready for this. And so I was like, okay, we can't do this. I was like, I've gone through cancer. I've lost a
Right.
breast. Like, I didn't even get reconstruction because I didn't want extra time away from my program. And I just said, no, this is happening. And so I just like worked nonstop. Like, I mean, I slept a couple hours. I would get up. My husband was great. He was feeding me, giving me water and all this stuff. And I just burned right through it. And I felt like that. I was like, I'm the thunder. I was like, you cannot stop me. So it was one of the things like when I did my defense and I passed, and I was just like, I knew I had it in me. And I was like, if cancer didn't stop me, I wasn't going to let, other people's
Right.
insecurities stop me. And so, we've developed this great relationship afterwards because I was like, just let me finish and then I'll
Right.
keep working and I'll work as a scientist for you as a postdoc. And so, I think if you have something that you really want to get to, then you need to be that thunder, be the lightning, and just
Yeah.
don't worry about the other people around you because they're just self-conscious themselves and it's not really a true reflection on you. And I think as
Right.
we go through cancer, like we get stronger. So
Yeah.
don't quiet your voice, don't hide your light, just let it be out there.
Oh my good. Yeah. Now I get the song why you said it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
what's one word that has been meaningful to you
Mhm.
and that you want to share with the audience? And why do you choose that word? And let it, usually I like to have like a word that can help someone else who's going through maybe
Mhm.
some wounds right now or some scars that they look at every day. And it's very difficult for them. What's
Mhm.
your one word and why you chose it?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I only thought about it right before we got on here today. I just said it was going to come out naturally. So my one word is wholeness.
Mm,
And the reason for this is that as I was going through my breast cancer diagnosis, I listened to the audiobook. It was sorry, it's escaping me right now. The Book of Joy. It's the Book of Joy. So it's the
oh
Dalai
yeah.
Lama and it's
Mhm.
Desmond Tutu. It's two
Yep.
religions coming together, and they're two older men at the end of their lives. And there was a section in this book that was talking about illness. And I'm going through this diagnosis, and I'm like, I don't know where this is going to go. And there is a quote from this book that says, that healing is coming to wholeness and it's possible whether or not the illness is curable.
Mm,
And that I actually wrote it out on a sticky note and I put it on my computer screen and I looked at it every day and I said, healing is coming to wholeness. So like when the oncologists were offering the cures, like that's why they wanted to rush me in to surgery. They wanted the chemotherapy. They wanted this cure. And I said, even to that first oncologist, I said, I'm not looking for a cure. And I was just like, I don't know where that came from, but I just knew that cancer was a part of me. And it's not that, I can't move forward in life with
mhm.
this there.
Right.
I can be more whole. And I actually contributed to Phil's book, The Someone Survival Guide, and
Mhm.
it's for breast cancer
Oh yeah,
survivors. And he
Phil.
said, write any passages. And so this quote was the one that I submitted for that and another little snapshot of my journey. But I just thought that, like, just think of the wholeness. Like, even though
Mhm.
you might not have like a thyroid, like I don't have a thyroid, I don't have a breast. And my therapist talked with me and she was like, okay, so if someone like lost a foot to diabetes, you wouldn't call them like person with one foot. You know,
Right.
you see them, they're still the same person. They just don't have
Mhm.
this one limb. If someone went to war and they lost their arm, you wouldn't call them, Bob with one arm, right? Like,
Right.
so the body part doesn't define you. So our breast doesn't define us. And, that we can see this wholeness without those body parts even though they're not there. So I feel
Yeah.
more whole now with two less organs than I did before with all my organs, which is really
I
wild.
love it. I love it. And I just want to leave you with the fact that as I've listened to you tonight and prior to tonight, just reading your
Mhm.
information, but definitely tonight after hearing everything, I would say that, how can I put this? You're resiliently confident. I know it
Mhm.
probably makes no sense, but I hear you speak. And when I hear you speak, I hear someone who's very, very resilient. Like, okay, you may have knocked me down over here, but you're not going to knock me out. I'm going to keep
Mhm.
on going. However, throughout both of your situations, it has gotten you to a place where you said that now you're whole. And I also see where it's gotten you to a place of even more confidence because you went from saying, oh, I'm just waiting and expecting for the next thing, for the next shoe to drop, basically. And it seems like through that process, you're like, okay, I got to be careful with my words now. Like, I'm not going to say,
Mhm.
but I do
Yeah.
also know what I've learned through this. But you can see the growth from
Mhm.
the very first time where you were resilient, but now you have even more resilience, but you also have the confidence to say, you know what? I'm not going to take this. This is what I feel that I need to do. And I think that with you showing your light to everyone else, it's going to help so many other women and men to literally go in with a plan and be prepared. And even if they're scared, they can look at everything that you've said, everything that you've done, and it's encouragement for them, even in weak moments. And it's sort of like, I believe that we all can gain something from one another, and we can gain strength from each other when we feel weak. And also when we're strong, we can, pass that out too. But I think for ultimately, when I think of you, I think of resilience and I think of confidence. And I just see that this is going to grow even more. And you're so passionate about everything that you love. And that resilience and confidence just exudes from you. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on here. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure, and I just love being able to, help and share my story, share my scars, already got them right
absolutely.
here showing. So yeah, it
Thank
really
you.
does help. And I
Yeah,
think that's the best thing that we have is community here. So thank you so much for
you
this
are
podcast. It's
so
amazing.
welcome. So welcome. All right, everyone. This wraps up another episode of Our Scars Speak. And for each and every one of you who are listening, if you have a story, you have scars, mental and physical scars, know that they speak a story that can help heal the wounds of another. I don't know when you're supposed to tell your story, but hopefully you will one day, because they truly can heal other people. So without further ado, this is our time with you. We love you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.